All right, everybody, we are live for another episode of the Perceptive podcast here on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. For tonight, we're going to be talking about the marketing of modern retro games and the work and assistance Yacht Club Games provided for the recently released game Cyber Shadow. Joining me from Yacht Club Games is marketing manager Celia Schilling. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm doing great. How are you?
I am doing all right. We are just like post snowstorm here on the East Coast. I'm not sure where you are located. Where is Yacht Club anyway?
We're in sunny California. It's
Uh,
like 72 today. I went outside and it was super warm.
we're preparing for more snow in a few days here.
I'm sorry.
But it is great to have you on. Thanks again for agreeing to come on for this lovely little chat of ours.
Thank you for having me.
I was just talking to Celia about like we somehow playing. We both have Nintendo related stuff in our respective backgrounds, just
So
by
everyone,
complete happenstance there.
yeah, it's all a facade, and so people think that we like video games.
There we go. But it is a pleasure to have you on tonight. Like I said, we're going to be discussing kind of the work that Yacht Club Games did for Cyber Shadow, as well as some of the challenges of marketing games like this. So, since this is your first time on one of these casts, could you talk a little bit about who you are and what is your kind of background when it comes to game dev and or just with Yacht Club?
Sure. Okay. So my name is Celia. So at Yacht Club Games, I handle marketing, PR, community management, and a little bit of licensing.
Hmm.
I guess my background in the video game industry, I've been here, oh my gosh, like just about 7 years now. I'm the newest member, well, one of the newest members to the Yacht Club Games team, but I worked previously in video game hardware marketing as well as for an AR app kind of game thing.
Great. When did you join Yacht Club?
So it's almost been a year. So I got technically hired in March. The world shut down, and I started my first day in April, remote.
All right. So, I guess what attracted you to working at Yacht Club? I know they've been around, I think, since like 2013, 2014, somewhere around there.
Man, so many things. First and foremost, I'm a fan of Shovel Knight. I played the game like years ago, and I was like, wow, like this looks just like my retro games. So I was like, I want to play this. Like, I need to check this out, and I fell in love instantly. But I also like I was attracted to Yacht Club Games because of their philosophy. Like, they don't just make games you love; they make you love games,
Yeah.
and I think that's really true. And besides that, like all of my colleagues are insanely passionate people, and you
Hmm.
can see that through their work. And when
Yeah.
I saw like Shovel Knight and like all the fun that they were doing, I just had to be a part of it myself.
Hmm. I've spoken with David a few times on previous
Mhm.
casts, and yeah, I know that Yacht Club was originally. I think they were at Way Forward, which like really like got them like situated when it came to kind of remaking or modernizing retro games. And as I was just talking to Celia before the cast, we've certainly played a lot of modern retro games over the last 10 years. It's definitely been a space where indie developers I think have both flourished, but at the same time I think it's become a lot harder to stand out in that space. Again, like with Shovel Knight, that was kind of like one of the first really big name successes in terms of, hey, it's a game released this decade, but it also looks like a game from 1988.
Yeah, so I with the I guess the emergence of popularity of like retro style games, or we can even go a step further with pixel art games. I
Hmm.
think it is dependent on like the story and the marketing and the gameplay that really help it shine the most. So
Yeah. And I guess for yourself, have you had a chance to play any other like really solid modern retro game examples lately, or even just in your spare time?
lately, oof. My whole brain's been Cyber Shadow, so I can't even think. And I'm like, this isn't really modern, but like I played Cave Story recently, but that was a little from a while ago. So yeah, Cyber Shadow. I played Cyber Shadow recently.
Yeah, it's good that you play that one because you kind of need to know about in order to do marketing with it. But
Think right.
yeah, But I guess we'll start with talking a little bit more about Cyber Shadow and Yacht Club Games' involvement.
Mhm,
And
yeah.
if the developer is interested in coming on to talk more from a design perspective in the future, let me know, and I'm more than happy to talk brutal platforming for hours to come.
Sounds good. I'll carry the word over.
So, uh, for people watching, we played Cyber Shadow on stream about a week ago. I'm going to have a review up probably sometime next week. What attracted, I guess, how did things get started between Yacht Club and the developer of Cyber Shadow?
Yeah, okay, this is actually a funny story. My colleague David, the one that you've spoken with in the past, was on Twitter and he was like, clicking around looking at cool games, and he saw one of the early, I guess, postings of Cyber Shadow by RNA, and he was like, "Wow, this looks awesome!" So he shared it with the team, being like, "Wow, like
Mm-hmm.
I want to play this." We're really collaborative, so like he shared it with everyone, and we all agreed like this looks great. We have to talk to him. Someone message him. So David reached out to him and being like, "Hey, like we're looking to publish. Are you interested?" And RNA said no, and we're like, "Oh, okay, well, let us know." And the reason that RNA said no initially is because he had a no publisher rule, and the reason for that was that he was afraid that if someone published his game, he wouldn't have his vision. It'd get marketed in the way that they wanted to market it, and
Mm-hmm.
and then they just push it out in the world, and that's it. And once we actually started conversing more with RNA, he started to learn about our philosophy on things, about how it's his game, it's his vision, and we're willing to bring our collective pool of experience to help fine tune some things and bring it to fruition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
And then, mhm.
oh, I was going to say, yeah, and that's, I think, a common fear a lot of developers have, especially on the smaller side, when it comes to, really adhering to their vision for the game wants to be. But as I'm sure you and the rest of Yacht Club Games know, it's very challenging sometimes to, make that vision, I think, palatable to other people. Because I have played so many indie games that you can tell somebody put a lot of work into it, but it's just very hard, I think, to get that across to somebody who wasn't, on top of it or, in the project.
And yeah, no, that is a good point with certain things. And sometimes it's hard to convey a certain message,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you're not able to work with them closely. And I would say that we're really lucky at Yacht Club Games since we're so like close knit and we are so hands on with things
Mm-hmm.
that we're able to really bring that vision forward.
Yeah, and what you're describing there remind me a lot when I spoke with, I think, Dave Oshie of New Blood, who their whole vision is like modern retro first person shooters. And I know, like, when I spoke with him on previous casts, he was just like, yeah, we're just sticking to this style. Like, you whatever vision you want that's, cool and crazy, we're going to support you 100% of the way. Just go nuts with it.
That's so funny. I have to check out their marketing campaign then. I'm very interested.
So, when did Yacht Club kind of like get involved with Cyber Shadow's development?
So it was about like I'm gonna say 3 years ago.
Okay.
But something to keep in mind is that RNA has been working on Cyber Shadow for like almost 10 years now. I think it's 8 years.
Hmm.
And when I say working on, I don't mean he's like sitting there developing the game for 8 years. I mean, like 8 years ago, he drew Shadow on a napkin and was like, ninjas are cool. Like, I'll do something with this eventually. And then it led into like, he started to work on it more seriously. And it's like, I guess I'm doing this now. Um, so yeah, and then for Yacht Club Games development, when we initially contacted him, like when David saw those screenshots, was like, we need to play this, we need to help this. RNA sent the first build that he had sent us
Hmm.
actually was pretty near to complete like version of the game,
Okay.
and that's when we started giving our feedback.
Hmm. So I'm sure right now that either in chat or watching this recorded, there's probably a developer out there working on their own modern retro game, and they're probably thinking to themselves, "How do I get this to Yacht Club, or how do I get somebody to notice it?" I guess any advice or anything that you and the team saw with Cyber Shadow that kind of said like, "Aha, we should look closer into this game."
That is also a really good question. So for that, like we're not quantity over quality type of developer. So we're very, we're not just going to be like, everyone, come here, we'll publish everyone. It's more of like if it fits correctly, like with the puzzle pieces. Like it appealed to us when we first saw Cyber Shadow. It appealed to us like style wise. It appealed to us just because platformers are awesome. We love platformers, and it just fit that way. I don't think we have a particular outline of like it needs these 8 qualities. If you don't have that, see you later, dude. It just really depends. But what I would suggest to any game developers out there, if you're interested in getting your game published, always reach out. The worst thing they can say is like no or not right now, and or they could say yes. You never know. So I would suggest doing that. And when you submit your pitch, please include as much info as possible. Don't just tell the name of the game and then that's it. I mean, be like, cool, but what can you show us?
Yeah, and I think it's very tricky when it comes to, I think, showing off like that modern retro feel to it. And I think part of the challenge, I want to get your thoughts on this as well, seeing as you've played these games and obviously with working with Yacht Club, that there's a line I feel between we're going to make this game in the style of, a Ninja Gaiden or a Mario or a Castlevania versus I am just trying to copy or make a game as close to it, warts and all. And I feel like that line is what kind of separates a lot of these games in terms of notoriety. That I have played, we were joking in chat, but I have certainly have played plenty of platformers that they feel worse than the games that were made 20, 30 years ago. And I just want to get your thoughts on like where do you feel that line is in terms of kind of like good retro and bad retro?
So this is actually something that I feel that we should probably take a step away from because with gaming in general, of course we say there's good and there's bad, but I like to think of video games kind of as an art. So there is no good or bad art. There's I really enjoyed this art or I did not enjoy this type of art. And so for that, I guess scaling it down a bit of like why we have certain platform or certain of that style of games feel right to us and don't. It also comes into what we're used to with our nostalgia, our expectations, the connotative idea of how we see the game and how it should play. Actually, I had a discussion about this. I'm probably jumping ahead a little bit, but
Mm-hmm.
with Cyber Shadow, I was asked, like, is it challenging to market a difficult game? But the
Mm-hmm.
thing is, though, is that Cyber Shadow has the look and a feel of like the 8-bit era of gaming. And back then, NES games were hard. They were super difficult. Oh my gosh, I died countless times in Ninja Gaiden. I was like, ah. And so for that, if you opened up Cyber Shadow and the game was super easy, like cakewalk, you could beat it in 5 minutes, people would be disappointed. So I feel like it's a lot of like how the game is interpreted, marketed, the look of it. There's just so many aspects of what is appealing and what can be less appealing to fans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I do have a few questions for you regarding that kind of. Thank you, Juan, for saying that in chat. And we do have the chat if you want to pop that open, if there's any questions or comments as well. That was in the link that I sent you. Just so that you're not wondering what the hell we're all talking about and ranting. But
It's all good. I have it open, and it's like Celia's gonna read all these and think, why are they making all these strange jokes?
mhm.
I am, buddy. I am.
Yeah, but as I was saying, like the difficulty, and we'll talk more about this in the next few minutes as well, in terms of Cyber Shadow, I think it's always been that very careful line to walk. I've played Ninja Gaiden myself. I could only beat Ninja Gaiden 1 with save states. Like, I don't have the time anymore to play something that brutal without that. And as you said, like, I think there is that opinion that marketing these games is very difficult. And it reminds me when I have conversations with adventure game developers, as the adventure genre is now, what, like over 30 years old, maybe a little bit more than that. And there's definitely that challenge, I think, of getting new people interested in these games. And I just want to get your thoughts on that, like with your marketing background. Like, do you approach or do you think about like somebody new, like somebody who didn't grow up playing a NES or a SNES, and trying to appeal to them to check out this game?
So with marketing to newer generations, it how do I describe this? Okay. So with marketing to them, it can be difficult sometimes because, it
Mhm.
doesn't have the flashy 3D graphics. It's not in VR. You have to come up with a way of relating interests for certain age demographics. Like, for
Mhm.
example, like ninjas. Everyone likes ninjas. Okay, there's a market there. So, for that, what events can we appeal to for that? Another one is the emerging chiptune scene. There's tons of young kids getting really involved in the music. And
Mhm.
it's like, awesome. Okay, so how do we fixate on that? Okay, so, like, for example, we just actually, right before this interview, we got done with an event with the composer Ricky Martin. So we advertised it on Twitter where anyone could join the Discord and listen to the composer talk about his methodology and like his process for creating the music. And that got a bunch of music fans who might not generally be interested in playing retro style video games, but that brought them in, and they hear the music and they're like, oh, I wonder what it's like in the game. That's a new opportunity to get a new audience. So it's looking at all the avenues and not being like, like, hello there, full like fellow kids, like buy our game. It's like, no, you should find what's appealing to people of all walks of life and target on that approach.
Okay. And I guess bringing this back to Cyrus Show, and for those of you watching, we have about an hour, well, now about 40 minutes, like in terms of our schedule. I don't want to keep Celia here all day. I know she has other meetings to get to. But to get back kind of on topic regarding Cyber Shadow, as you said, Yacht Club reached out about, you said like 3 years ago to Arnie, and that was kind of like when the deal began to finalize. I guess once Arnie kind of like signed up and Yacht Club agreed to work with them, what kind of assistance did Yacht Club provide? I guess from like a publishing or designer, like what kind of advice or work did they do for him?
Course. So basically, once everything was like said and done, okay, so he sent over his build of the game to us, and we brought our collective pool of experience to give him feedback on the game. So it kind of felt initially kind of like QA because we played through the game and we gave a lot of feedback. Like for example, like introducing like gameplay elements into the game while also introducing level hazards, or certain parts of like the cutscenes. We're like, oh, like it actually might be better to introduce this character's cutscene a little bit earlier or a little bit later. And
Mm-hmm.
like also when we played through the game, like some levels were made shorter, some were made longer. It just kind of depends uh, exactly what our focus was and who was like providing the feedback for that. But collectively, we helped put the fine polish on the game and like really help what Arne's vision was shine.
Mm-hmm. And I'm interested, like what you just said about like kind of changing the pacing around. Any specific examples that you can think of regarding that? For like again, for my audience with a lot of developers listening, like were there any good examples of something that stood out either in a good or not so good way that you kind of like help Arne out with?
So I'm not sure exactly what I can talk about, but I'll say like generally,
Mm-hmm.
like for example, if there's like a level hazard, like a bunch of the steam coming out, and like instead of having like 12 of them, not really, there wasn't 12, but like instead of having like a ton of them coming out once, it's like maybe we should introduce one of them and then show it turns on and off, and then introduce it just being constantly on, just so people learn while playing the game, so it progressively gets more difficult, but they're growing along with the game.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just a vague example.
Yeah, and that kind of onboarding, I think, is very crucial, not just for modern retro games, but just game design in general, because I've seen games that don't do that. I recently tried an adventure game that like gave like no explanation about how the UI worked or how anything was done. And I think there is that tendency among like indie developers or first time developers to assume that everybody knows already how all this stuff works. And I think one of the challenges of turning that into a commercial product is being able to step back and say, okay, maybe somebody didn't grow up playing a Ninja Gaiden, or maybe somebody doesn't know exactly what's in my head, and I need to be able to explain that to somebody and do it in a way that actually, teaches them about this game.
Yeah, I agree. Like teaching is it's a great mechanic to use in game design. So they're learning and they don't even know it. It's kind of like those jumpstart games, which were actually just schoolwork, and we were all fooled.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Now, I do have a few nitpicks or complaints about Cyber Shadow, and again, I know you're not the developer. I'm not going to go too like in the weeds with you about it, but I'm sure like these questions may have came up during playtesting or some of the Yacht Club games consider, and this kind of goes back to what we were saying a few minutes ago about difficulty, and it kind of felt like the difficulty of Cyber Shadow like spiked about halfway to 75% of the way through. Like the pure section when you got like the mines that did like 5 points of damage to you, like that's when it started to get like very brutal. And I'm sure with Yacht Club doing play testing and checking out the game, the thought about difficulty curve I'm sure was on everybody's minds. So I was just wondering if there's anything you can talk about in terms of, I think, settling on just how hard uh, Yacht Club wanted Cyber Shadow to reach in terms of its difficulty.
So for that, okay. So initially the game, you got way less health drops, so y'all should be happy. And then for it, yeah, difficulty was on our mind. Like in my head, I'm like, I died so many times that I don't want to talk about it. But it's kind of one of those things that when consulting difficulty, we tried to be, of course it's going to be difficult, but we don't want it to be unfair. And so with polishing the game, yeah, sure, there's a difficulty spike, but we believe that we're not going to underestimate our players. Like they can, if they want to get there, they will. And, with practice makes perfect, and taking your time actually does help out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, its difficulty is very hard, no pun intended, to get right with any game. Um, I have people who still question my ability with Spelunky 2, even though I beat that game and I wrote a not so negative but kind of disappointing review on it. But people are like, "Oh, he just hates because he sucks at it." I'm like, "No, I beat the entire game. I can talk about it." And the same certainly with Cyrus Shadow. I finished the entire game. I watched a few streamers who did get frustrated at the same parts as me. So I was like, oh, good, it wasn't just me who had to die 10 times in that one part. And it is, I think, very interesting about trying to get that balance, right? As you said, like with the playtesting Yacht Club did, like there's that very careful line you have to tread in terms of how easy do we make this? Because as you said, there are people, I'm sure there are people on the forums right now just saying, oh, Cyber Shadow was easy, why the hell would you make it easier for people? I beat the entire thing in like 2 hours.
Range of difficulty kind of varies. So yeah, you're saying some people in the forum are like, this is easy. Like my friend Brandon, like beat it really quickly, and he was like, oh man, like I love these type of games. But he also plays Ghosts and Goblins, so go figure there.
Yeah.
And then for some people, yeah, who aren't experienced with platformers, or maybe they are, but they're more used to different kinds of platformers, they'd be like, oh man, like this is the hardest thing I've ever played in my life. Like, don't you want people to play the game, like, and beat it? So it just depends, and it is a hard line to walk, and it's kind of one of those things where, like I said earlier, that it's going to be difficult, but we at least try to not be cruel about it. So like you do have a fighting chance if you practice enough.
Are there any specific examples, anything you can remember in terms of additions to Cyber Shadow to kind of ease up on the difficulty?
You got more health.
Okay.
But as anything else, I don't think I can talk about it.
Okay, not a problem. I guess in terms of one thing I've always interesting, as you said, you got in touch with Arne about 3 years ago, and around that time the game was mostly finished, or just about there. Now it was obviously just released about a week or two, maybe a little bit more than that ago at the time of this taping. I guess anything you can talk about in terms of like what else was done once Arne came on board with Yacht Club in terms of like the final the home stretch of finishing Cyber Shadow.
something that to account for that people might or may not realize is that there's a lot more than just like, okay, I finished this game. Okay, so after the polishing
Mhm.
and all the feedback we gave him, so for that, he's a one-man studio. So he every issue or hotfix or anything that we needed from or advised him to take care of. If there's an issue in the pipeline, there's no one else to help with that. He's focused on one issue till he gets to the next one,
Mhm.
and like it's a collaborative process. And he needs time to work on things. Then we check it out again, and we're like, oh, this looks great, or maybe tweak this, and then it goes back and forth. So once he actually finished the game, there's a lot more that goes into it because it's also making sure he can get ported, translated. Like RNA doesn't speak 12 languages, so
Mhm.
we can't have him just write it. It's like clarifying like the script on things. It's like there's so much more into it with coordinating for it to go on like platforms and coordinating the pre-order. Like those are always like months in advance as well. So the whole process for things, it takes a little bit.
Mhm. From a marketing point of view, when did like Yacht Club get, I think, really serious in terms of like the marketing push for Cyber Shadow?
Okay, so I was working on Cyber Shadows marketing. I think after I got hired, like a month in, that's like when I started to like hop into things. But something to keep in mind is that we had been marketing the game previous to my hire. We brought it to conventions.
Hmm.
We announced it on our direct. We showed clips of it. We also we did processes to also include the game in our social media and different forums. But for my hand and experience with it, like it started to really ramp up once we were able to announce the launch date, because people were aware is in the circle, and of course we'd share gifts here and there, keep people like enticed about the game. But once we're like, hey, it releases on January 26th, and it's like, okay, now open the floodgates of like marketing opportunities. We're headed in.
Hmm. And I definitely want to add a little extra or clarify what you said about doing like extra marketing, because I think this is another thing a lot of first time developers and students tend to miss out on. Is that just because you hear about a game, let's say a week, a month, a few months before its release, doesn't mean that's all the marketing that was done for it. And I think one of the major points that we see around successful games, as you said, is getting the word out there as early as you can, and of course targeting like the right people, conventions of retro game fans, as you said earlier, people who like chiptune music. Like, you need to be able to understand that, like, for developers listening, that you don't want to wait until like a week before your game comes out to say, hey, let me put up a tweet about my game for the first time in 6 years. Because I've seen developers do that. I've spoken to other people who do marketing and PR, and they've said very much that. Like, somebody gets in touch with them and says, hey, I just finished this game. I'm going to release it next week. Can you do my whole marketing campaign in 3 days for me? Thanks.
Oh man, 3 days. I don't. That's stressful. It sounds like a game jam for marketing. It's terrifying. I don't recommend it.
Now, my friend Sharky in chat, he brought up a point that it's something that we've certainly had a lot of debates about. I know this is a very popular one, especially among like game dev Twitter, about what is and what isn't a one man studio. It's always that very weird line. Like, I've seen some people say a one man studio just means literally you do everything. Some people will argue one man means you do the design and then you can outsource the other work. I guess, any thoughts on that debate from your point of view?
So for that, I feel like I shouldn't touch that. It's kind of those things where like I can't make a definition for it.
Hmm.
But the thing is though is that though we gave him feedback, we didn't do the feedback for him.
Hmm.
RNA did it. RNA did literally. He made Cyber Shadow, and that's
Hmm.
his game. And as for like the additional help, that's through the publishing side of things.
Okay.
So, but as him as a developer, yeah, that's his game. So that's my view on it, but everyone's open to interpret what they think.
Don't worry, I'm sure they're going to bug me, and we'll have plenty more arguments here and on my Discord for the next few months without you. You can
Oh
avoid that
boy.
bullet. You can dodge that bullet there. um, Amir in chat asked a question about what kind of marketing services do publishers provide for similar indie games. If anyone has an idea on that.
So for that, I can only speak for Yacht Club
Hmm.
Games since I'm in there. But for other publishers, it could be a range of help, and it kind of depends on which publisher you go with. And I definitely would recommend reading your contract and all the little terms. I know that like we're all not lawyers here, but it's very, very important to read your
Hmm.
contract to know what services that you could take advantage of or possibly might not have that you particularly wanted. So it's always good to have a good understanding of what your expectations should be with the publisher.
Hmm. Yep,
Mm-hmm.
and I had to do that when I signed my contract for my books. I had to read that contract very carefully to make sure that everything worked out for everyone involved.
It's
I guess.
important.
Hmm. Getting back to kind of the marketing side then for Cyber Shadow, just for these kinds of games in general. I guess one thing that I've seen like developers try and do, and this goes back to what we were saying a few minutes ago about kind of embracing the difficulty of it. I'm sure everyone remembers from the Mighty Number Nine campaign. They were used like the phrase, that infamous line about like a dateless person on prom night or whatever. Like they were trying to get so cheesy that it kind of backfired on them. With like kind of marketing these kinds of games again, especially that kind of old school, new school kind of feel to them. How do you approach, I guess, like trailers or like promotional material for a game like this?
Well, for that, we kept with Arne's vision. Okay, so for it, basically, Arne, some like I guess key points to keep in mind with your campaign is that like it is it's an 8-bit style game. It has that retro aesthetic. It has a classic feel, and it also has a modern convenience or two. So basically, for the marketing materials, a lot of it we had illustrations of like Shadow looking like cool with his ninja items, and we also used a lot of GIFs. GIFs were really like my best friend through this marketing campaign because I couldn't tell you, oh my gosh, there's enemies swarming in like close like cavities or whatever. But the thing is though, sorry, rewind. I could tell you that you're gonna have a lot of close quarters combat, or I could show you getting swarmed by bugs, and it's like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna die here. So to help give people a gauge of expectation for the game, we primarily used in-game footage and not only just the gameplay but the story as well, and we also used illustrations.
Hmm. Yeah, and we do a show every week where we review indie store pages and give advice. And one of the big ones that we say is you need more gifts. And it sounds like for people aren't uh, who aren't like following games or don't know game design, that it just sounds like we're being nitpicky. But especially with a game like this, if it's better to show somebody, hey, this is an old school crazy game than just saying, yes, you fight ninjas or there's a bunch of robots. Use your imagination to to imagine what those look like.
So yeah, I'm more of a and every campaign's different. So
Hmm.
like what we did with Cyber Shadow might be something different that we would do for a different game.
Hmm.
But for Cyber Shadow, I definitely felt like showing was the best way to help hype up people because when people watch these games, I don't know if you are a younger sibling, but I was a younger sibling, and so majority of my gameplay initially was me watching my older sister play the Nintendo
Hmm.
and or the Super Nintendo or like all that. And so basically for that is like, oh, and you think of like, oh, what I would do differently. It's like, oh, like when those bugs are there, I would, spam this move or like use the swag blade or something of the sort. And so when using that approach, it can help people put themselves in the game, like as they were playing and help it stick in their head.
Hmm. Now, regarding like the trailer itself, this is nothing that we've talked about on our shows. I just want to get your thoughts on this with your marketing background. Any tips or advice for developers in terms of how to cut a really good trailer for their game?
For that, if you cannot cut a trailer by yourself, or make a friend that can, because trailers are a first impression, and sometimes you don't get a second chance to make a first impression. So it's very, very important if you're displaying your game to be able to capture what exactly you wanted to express for that video. So I would definitely say, like, if you can't yourself, then find someone or take a class or something and learn yourself. Like there's a lot of like resources out there that would be able to assist you. And the beautiful thing about the internet is you can post on Reddit or on Twitter and be like, hey, I need help on this. Do you want to collaborate and like work something out? So there's a lot of options available out in the world.
Mm-hmm. Anything particular in terms of what to include in a trailer that you can think of?
Have an end slate. That's important. Okay, so for it, I think that you should have a marketing beat with your
Mm-hmm.
trailer. So, and it also, when I say marketing beat, I mean you should have a clear marketing message of what you want to announce in that trailer. Is it a sneak peek? Is it coming soon? So you're just like announcing it. Is it available now, or you're announcing a release date? So it is very important on your end slate to express that so people know what to expect. So it's like, oh, I'm excited about this game, but I don't know where to get it, and then
Mm-hmm.
it's gone. But at the end, you're like, coming soon. It's like, oh, it's coming soon. I should follow up about this, or it's available on January 26th. I guess I'm gonna go buy the game. Can I pre-order it? So,
Mm-hmm.
speaking of pre-orders, when you are posting your trailer, and if you do have a pre-order, and you're able to have a pre-order, I would suggest doing it just for the excited, the influx of
Mm-hmm.
traffic going on. It's always good to have somewhere where you can direct the traffic if they want to pre-order or wish list your game. So that's just something, a little tiblet. But in addition to that, it's always good to be clear on what is in the game.
Mm-hmm.
And because you know what I mean? Like if we showed off Cyber Shadow as a sweet dating sim and then you play the game and it's a 2D action platformer, people are going to get really confused. So I would suggest definitely having a very clear focus of how you want to express your game and what assumptions people might make about the game when watching the
Mm-hmm.
trailer to make sure that you're meeting up with what people should expect.
Mm-hmm. And I think having that goal for the trailer is an important aspect because Shark and I we do our the show that I talk about every Thursday, and we've seen trailers that are just either all over the place. They're trying to do every single thing about their game in a minute to a minute and a half, or the trailer is just completely nondescript. We literally watched a trailer yesterday that was just here's just some shots of asteroids and stars for literally a minute. There was no gameplay footage, there's no war, there's just here's just like screensaver art for a minute. And we're always like, is there a game in this trailer? We don't know.
Um, Also for that approach, if they're doing like a hint or something, that might be awesome. It also depends like on the marketing campaign. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe if that's a part of their grand scheme of things, and first we're like asteroids, what's this? And then like the next trailer is like you're on Earth looking up. Like that would be a really cool way to spin it. But I don't know what the game is, and I don't know what their plan is. But
Mm-hmm.
I hope from a takeaway from this is always have a plan, no matter what it is. Plans are important.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Did
yeah.
did a yacht club work on anything in terms of the store page for Cyber Shadow, or was that just on Arne's point or Arne's side?
So for the store page, we took care of that.
Okay. Any advice in terms of store page you can give any prospective developers or students watching?
Um, so for the store page, it's good to have a lot of like. Okay, so it depends on the game, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Like, can you have a concise description of the game? It's very important. Like it, then have like a short blurb. Also account for character count when describing the long form version of it. I don't know. There's a lot of like small things. Screenshots are your best friend. It's good to include the main trailer, the trailer that everyone's gonna have foremost in their brain. Um, on the store page as well if you're able to, and
Mm-hmm.
to go with that one. Because certain companies will like for us, for example, we released several trailers, but then our main one, the launch day announcement, is the one that we have on our store page. So it just kind of depends exactly what approach you want to have with that, but keep in mind for character count, um, and try to be as concise as possible with it because sure, there's a lot of information that you want to come across to your fans, but you want to make sure that it's not too much information, like you're not writing essays and essays and essays when A, you don't have the character count for it, and then B, people like lose interest. So it's good to have like key points of what it's about and the
Mm-hmm.
features.
Yeah. And as you were saying a few minutes ago, GIFs, images, anything that can really show off what the game is should be on that store page. Because
Mm-hmm.
I've seen some developers who have like nothing. Like there's like nothing that can actually explain what the game is, or there's like no screenshots or gifs, and then you're just wondering, what is this game that I'm even trying to play? And as you said a few minutes ago, you really only have one shot to hook somebody or get them interested, because once they click off your page, they're not coming back. Let's see. Amir asks, do many indies use data analysis in their marketing? And how does it compare to other sectors of the industry? If you have anything to say on that.
Okay, so analytics are your best friend. I
Mm-hmm.
would suggest paying attention to that. If you like do a analysis on like how many Google searches are like what keywords are being used for your game, how many people are purchasing your game, like what demographics, so you could help like market better and strengthen that community. It is very important, and I think to the depth, if you're like a huge AAA studio, you might have more resources to look into like the character profile of every single person that buys your game. But as like a smaller company, it is important to keep an eye on that. Don't neglect it, because that lets you know how you're doing, what the industry standard would be for that particular title, what your expectations are. Eventually, when your game has a little bit of like, but it's more seasoned because it's been out for a while, you can track with your sales on whether you should put it on sale or not, or like understand discounting in general. So yeah, analytics are your best friend. It's going to show you a lot about your game that you might not realize.
Mm-hmm. Anything in particular for developers to pay attention to, like when they're like looking up data for their game?
Okay, so one thing, okay, web traffic's a fun one to look at. I always find it interesting where do people go from your landing page, but that's a whole Google Analytics thing that I think might be a little bit of a schlep. But it's good to know, is it primarily coming from YouTube? Like, are YouTubers the ones that are like recommending it? Is it coming from Reddit? Is it coming from Discord? Is it like, you have to find out where it's coming from? Are they just web searching it? And then like, let's say that you're not getting organic visitors from like a web search. It's like, okay, well, how can I get more known where people are more likely to have that come up? And then like, in addition to that, another thing to focus on is sales. How well is your game selling? So maybe like, let's say for like pre-order, like you're marketing in a certain way, and let's say the pre-order isn't up to your expectation of what you had predicted, and it's like, well, maybe we should go back and reevaluate our plan. Are we doing this correctly? Though you have a marketing plan, if something's not working, you're more than welcome to change it. It's your marketing plan. Like,
Yep.
I won't tell anyone, I promise. Like, no one will. So basically, like, let's say that something like doesn't work out. Yeah, you just change it and then check the analytics. Does that help? And then moving from there.
Mm-hmm. I guess as somewhat of a tangent, but I'm curious from like a marketing point of view. How do you find like having sales, like like the first week, the 10% discount, or when you go on sale, like 25%, 50% off? Like, any thoughts about that for developers watching? Because that is another, I think, very hard discussion that people have had about. Okay, do I leave my game at $20? When do we drop down to 10? Do I even go below that? Anything along those lines?
Okay, so that's kind of difficult to answer just for the fact that every game is different.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at like Nintendo games, like
Mm-hmm.
Breath of the Wild, still $60. So kind of one of those things that you have to decide for yourself, but also you want to make sure that you're not undercutting yourself. And then also, if you do a deep discount, is there a specific reason for it? You always have a reason of why you're going to put on a sale, and even if it's just because, have a reason in your head of why you're doing it and provide value to that. And yeah, just trust your gut with things, and look at, and when pricing in general, just look at the standards of like what type of games would you consider their competition, and there's a ton of things that go into it, so it's really hard to like do in one whole spiel. But yeah, those are a few things that you should look at. And also, don't, and I said this earlier, don't undercut yourself also.
Mm-hmm.
Like, especially if you're just starting out and you feel like your game is good, price it competitively. Like, it's okay.
Mm-hmm. I think that's one of the more interesting aspects. That's probably a topic for another show, but about how much like game pricing has really fluctuated over the I would say the last like 3 4 years. Like 3 4 years ago, it seemed like obscene to price your game at more than $10 for some of the independent developers, and now we're seeing kind of like a rise or a step in quality with games being price at launch, like between $20 and $30 for a new indie game.
It's really interesting, and I love that the perceived value of games has gone up, especially for indie studios.
Oh
Like
yes.
people work so hard. I'm not just talking about ourselves, but like the whole indie community works so hard on their games, and they should be paid for what they're worth. And so I'm really happy that they're able to make more money. It's really important. We all need to eat.
Yes. There we go. That's the motto right there. That's the motivation for indie developers. As a quick time check, it is about 5:30 my time. I know you said you had to go in about 10-15 minutes. Is that still good? Okay. And for the people watching us live right now, if you have any questions for Celia regarding Yacht Club, marketing, things along those lines, this will be officially last call for them. But with that said, with like kind of like the message that you wanted to give out for Cyber Shadow, were there any examples of as you said a few minutes ago about having to pivot with your marketing, like if something doesn't work to change it? Any examples of that with how you and the team approach that with Cyber Shadow?
For that, luckily, we didn't have to do any pivoting. Oh my gosh. That saved a whole lot of schlep with me. So what was really awesome about working with Arne for Cyber Shadow was that we worked very closely. I message Arne every day. I messaged him today. He let me know that he's taking a break on the weekend. He's not going to look at his computer, and I'm like, bother you Monday. So that's how closely that we work together. And for that, luckily, I was able to keep very true to his vision, but at the same time, work closely with our team to make sure that there was a good response. And luckily, and analytically wise, everything checked out. So there wasn't a reason for us to change the message because the community was being receptive. But just because there's success with this, there's always chances, to make it even better. So eventually, when I do a postmortem on this, I'll like look back and be like, what could I have made excellent instead of great?
Mm-hmm. Here's, I think, a very interesting question when it comes to like, marketing these games. This may be a little too advanced for our talk, but I want to see what your thoughts are on this.
Huh?
When we talk about kind of how to market games, like some games I think definitely have a stronger foundation for showing themselves off. Like, very stylized titles, like Grease, Ori, Hollow Knight, or, you know, very powerful engines, like we see with a lot of like Unreal style games. When it comes to these games, however, I feel like they kind of start, with a bit of a handicap with the pixel art. And the reason why I say this is that I've spoken to people, I know there are a few people on my forums or Discord, who absolutely cannot stand pixel art. Like, the second they see it, they're just like, I don't care about this game, I'm not interested in it. And for myself, like, I have seen amazing examples of pixel art, and I've seen not so amazing examples. And what I want to ask you is, in terms of, I think, fighting that stigma with the marketing, any advice for developers who are working on their own pixel style games or, that kind of aesthetic, in terms of, like, is there a way to get around that, or is it an unfortunate, like, necessary evil when you use this aesthetic?
Okay, so I'm about to admit something to you guys. When I see a first person shooter game that's like super advanced looking, I just turn away. I'm sorry, I can't play it. Everyone has their preconceived like opinions about any style ever. Some people like anime, some people don't. Some people love pixel art, like myself. Oh my gosh, any pixel art game, hello, send it my way. So it just depends on the person. And the thing is, though, is that you, as a marketer, you cannot change people's minds yourself. And I wouldn't, I'd be open and friendly, but I wouldn't just focus on them trying to change their opinion. It's like pushing a giant rock up a hill. What I would focus on people reaching out to communities that are more receptive to it, or people who haven't quite are introduced to it in general. And one really cool thing about positivity is that it's contagious. Maybe they might not like pixel art, but their favorite YouTuber or Twitch person's playing that game and they love it. And it's like, whoa, this person that I follow loves it. maybe I was wrong about this game. Maybe the story is interesting. Maybe I'll check it out for a different reason besides me not liking the art. They might even play it and be like, wow, like I love this game, but I hate how it looks, but I love it. So it really just depends. And so I would focus on people that would be receptive to it. And, maybe the other people turn around and start to love it as well. You never know, but it's good to make your attention focused on something that's going to be a little bit more receptive.
Mm-hmm. That is the kindler version when I spoke with Dave from New Blood, who was like,
Mm-hmm.
"You don't like these style of art games?" And he's like, and he said some words. Unfortunately, I can't repeat because I'll get flagged for it there. But he said along those lines, just a lot more nastier. But yeah, it is true. You have to know who your market is, and that I think that extends beyond just modern retro games. And it is tough, I think, for developers. I guess that's actually a very interesting question. Like, when you and the team spoke with Arne about kind of like getting involved, like at the beginning, how well did he kind of communicate his vision of Cyber Shadow? Because I've seen some developers who they can describe their game, they can pitch it very easily, and then there are some who are just like, yeah, it's a platformer, and I jump, and that's their whole description of what this game is.
So for Arne, I'm not sure what the exact conversation was with my team because I wasn't there. But what I can say from my own personal experience with working with Arne directly was he kind of just went head in and was like, "Hey, this is my game. You're going to die a lot. Ninjas are cool." And like then we just started going into his inspirations. I'm a retro gamer myself, and he grew up with retro games as well. So we're just kind of gushing about our favorite games, and then it just went into all this different conversations of his inspirations and all of that. So I got a better understanding of where he was coming from and his thought process for the game was. And I'm really lucky that I was able to have that close contact with him, so I understood it. But in general, it's kind of those things to developers. I would say try to be as clear and concise as possible. I know everyone's not like a huge chatterbox like Arne is, but it's very important to convey your message of your game because you don't want any miscommunication. If
Mm-hmm.
and the thing is though is that like if I always double check with Arne like, did you mean this? And he's like, yes. And I'm like, okay, cool. I just want to make sure I don't like going rogue. But the thing is though is that it's very very important because if like say you're working with a publisher that manages like hundreds of IPs, like they might not have the opportunity to double check with you to make sure that it's the right vision. So you want to make sure that you're being clear.
Mm-hmm.
And what you could do is just write out ideas in a doc, and over time, just have everything laid out, or like build your own pitch deck so you have it just there and like this is my intention. I never have to say it again. So it just depends on how you want to do it. But yeah, be clear because there's always room for human error.
Mm-hmm. And this question came in the chat. I think this is a really good one. Hopefully, we have the time to explore this fully, but we'll see because I know we're like knocking on the end here. But Amir asks, what are your thoughts or what are people's thoughts on live game development as marketing? So, putting out videos or dev streams, kind of showing behind the curtain of what's going on during a game's development.
It's really cool. And we actually did that for Shovel Knight. I know a lot of my team,
Mm-hmm.
they worked on parts of the project on our Twitch channel. Um, and for that, I think it's great. But as long as you're not showing too much, it also depends of the developer gauging of how much they want to show, how open do they want to be. I think it's great. Like one of the things that we do at Yacht Club Games is we do blog dev articles. You can find them on yachtclubgames.com if you want to check them out. Anyways, and it's one of those things like it's great to pull back the curtain. It's great to have transparency, but also have a plan what you're showing. Don't if you have like a super secret final boss that's the end of your game and tells the whole story of everything, it might be good to not stream while you're writing the story for that. So it's up to the developer of showing what they want to show, but I always say have a plan of what you do want to show and what you want to hold as a surprise for the gamer when they play it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's another really interesting point. I've seen developers struggle with that. Some will, like, if you have something really amazing and cool to show, but let's say it's the final boss, or let's say it's just like completely revealing your entire plot in a trailer, that's not a good way of revealing too much. And it is that very careful line you have to walk in terms of you have to get people excited, but you don't want to kind of burn through all your A material right at the gate.
I agree completely. In a way, this is a little small marketing tip, guys.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Tell your story through a question. How
Mm-hmm.
far will he go? It's like, oh, how far will he? And your brain goes like a million things.
Yeah.
Or like, it's stuff like that. So it's like you're letting him know he's gonna instead of saying like a long journey, like, it's like how far? Like, I don't know. And so it has to bring a scope of the game without giving too much. And using that example, you can do that and apply that to many of your different parts of your development. And once again, it's up to the developer of how much they want to show. And I am laughing at Juan's comment too. But yeah, so it's up to the developer. I can't make that decision for you. But if you have on your team a marketing person, maybe talk to them about it. See what they have planned for showing of the game. You know what I mean? Like, you don't want it to be old news. You want to make sure news is fresh. So coordinate with your team, decide for yourself, make a plan, and do it.
Mm-hmm. You should tune in one of the streams when I do play platformers and hear all the remarks that get thrown at me about how bad I am no matter what when it comes to when I play these games.
Oh my gosh, I'll definitely do that and talk smack with them.
There we go, perfect. A few more questions, and we'll get to Will's question, I think, after this one. But one thing I wanted to ask you about, because you really don't get a chance to talk to too many people who do direct marketing at studios, and I want to get this one to you. What are your thoughts on the whole influencer YouTuber angle when it comes to promoting games these days? Because I feel like that has changed dramatically in like the past decade in terms of having other people showing off your game and how much of an impact that's having in terms of sales and the marketing side.
I and I say this, yes.
Mm-hmm.
YouTubers and influencers are amazing. They're great. Some of my very close friends are YouTubers, and they of different genres, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, though, is that for that, their word is very important. And the reason for this is that most people, the times are changing. Most people don't particularly focus on celebrities anymore. I think Jennifer Anderson's cool, but if she's wearing like a really cool hat, I'm probably not going to buy that hat. But a certain style of YouTuber that I follow, if she really likes the hat, I'm more interested in listening. So it's really evolved of way of how we interpret the advice from YouTubers and influencers. So if you can get it in their hands, that's amazing. So when you email them, treat them like a person. Don't have like a copy and paste type of open script. Maybe compliment their work, build a relationship with them. It's important because, they're more likely, if they get to know you a little bit, they're more likely to talk about your game. And that's important. And it's also important from the developer side to treat them like a human. Like, they're people too. They have interests. If they particularly only focus on shooter games, you can send them the game just to play, but I would consider maybe sending it to a person that their interest is in the same realm of what your game is.
Yeah.
Just so they're not looking at this being like, well, I don't play dating sims. Like, why do I want to do this? I like shooters.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it just depends.
Yeah.
It really, really depends.
And that really does wrap around talking about the overall discussion about marketing in terms of reaching the people who know who are a market for that game. If your game is a first-person shooter, sending it to somebody who only plays, puzzle games or match 3 titles, it's not really going to help you along that much.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we are like right at time. Final question from Will, and then I'll throw it to you for any final thoughts. But what form of promotion showed the largest benefit for the marketing of Cyber Shadow?
Oh man, so many aspects to it. It's hard to just nail one. Like, there's so much. Trailer really, really helps. Social support with platforms really helps. Word of mouth is amazing. And through that, it's also influencers are amazing as well. If a YouTuber really likes a game and they stream it, or a Twitch streamer streams it, that's thousands of people that could be interested in your game. So there's a ton of different avenues you can go to, and I would consider like taking a bit from each one and creating your own unique plan for it. I wouldn't say that there was one defining factor that was like a game-changing event, but together I think it was a very, very good campaign.
Okay. So with that, my final question for you before we kind of go into our wrap-up.
Yeah.
Anything else regarding the marketing of Cyber Shadow, the PR side, anything that we didn't touch on that you'd like to bring up before we begin to end things?
Oh man, there's so much. So gonna ravel my list. So for it with marketing is important. I know like focusing and getting the game out is important as well. Obviously, you need a product to market it. But I definitely think that if you want people to check out your game, you need to talk about your game, or otherwise they might not hear about it. Things might not be as lucky. If you're able to work with a marketing person who's able to handle PR and all of that, I would definitely suggest that just so you can focus on the game and they can focus about talking about it, and then everyone wins. And I guess my one word of advice is be receptive. So there's going to be people that love your game and you're gonna be like, thanks. And there's gonna be people that dislike your game, and you're gonna say, okay, like what did you not like about it? Be receptive to listening to the community, because it might help you figure out where their point of view is, and maybe have some constructive criticism for making something better in the future that you just might not have realized. And most importantly of all, have fun. Marketing is fun.
Mm-hmm.
So I wish you all the best.
Great. I hate to do this, but one question just popped into my brain. It's one I know a lot of developers have struggled with. I just want to get your thoughts quickly. How early should people start thinking about marketing? Because some people will wait until they have a finished prototype. Some will do, the second they have, graph paper down or they drew something up. Is there any, I guess, a reliable metric for how early to go into marketing for your game?
So my rule of thumb is show or plan your marketing campaign around how much content you have to show.
Mm-hmm.
If you can show all, because if the game's huge and there is so much you can share, you can talk about it for a while. Like, go
Mm-hmm.
for it, man. But like, if you don't have like, if your game's like let's say like an 8-hour game or something, like maybe like announcing it like a year prior, and then marketing like once you
Little,
have a career like
like more like little bits and pieces of it.
yeah, like if you, it just depends exactly what you're able to do, because like every game's different. Some games are like a 2-hour game, some are a 60-hour game. It really depends. Some's an open world and it never ends. So depending on what content you have a smart strategy with how much you can show without spoiling too much to keep people interested. Because if you're talking about a game for like 8 years or something and it's still not out and there's nowhere to, you don't want to be old news either. So it's a very tough line to go by, but trust your gut and stick to your plan.
All right. And again, we could sit here and chat for a few more hours, I'm sure. But I know you have to get going. If you are free in the future, if anyone else from Yacht Club wants to come on and hang, definitely let me know. We certainly have lots of time open these days.
I know, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, thank you so much for having me. I'll definitely carry the word over to my team.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, we'll be in contact. So thank
All,
you.
all right. So to end the castle, do you have anything you'd like to say to the fans of Yacht Club? Anything to kind of tie a bow on our discussion?
Yeah, of course. Well, first off, thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. I love talking about marketing, so this is definitely such a treat. If you want to have more information about any type of game development, my colleagues have posted so many blog articles talking about level design, like game mechanics, like literally everything. We literally did a 3-part blog on Joustus. Of how we made it and how we incorporated it in the game. So there's tons of like really fun gems in there, and you can check that out on yachtclubgames.com. You can also follow our social media pages. We're at Yacht Club Games on literally everything: Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, as well as YouTube and Twitch. And then lastly, if you haven't gotten a chance to check out Cyber Shadow, definitely do. It's so much fun. I really wish you the best ninja action adventure. And then lastly, yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right. And this is how we know Celia does marketing. She did all the social media plugs right there. I didn't even need to ask. That's how you know we have a marketing person on for the chat. All right. So, with that, if you wouldn't mind hanging on the call for like 30 seconds after we wrap, I'll just have a few things to go over with you. We will end things for our discussion tonight. So, as always, thank you to everybody watching this live or recorded. There'll be links to the various social media that Celia mentioned in the description in the recorded version. If you are a developer working on a game or want to talk design and would like to come on, please get in touch. We're always looking for guests. And you'd like to submit a game for me to look at for our weekly streams and our store page reviews, again, My lines of communication are open, so please get in touch. Come back for daily discussions on game design here and on Game Wisdom, where it's in the art and science of games. And until next time, have a great night. Take care, everybody.